doc, which institute you're at, if you're at an institute, which research discipline you're from, and what you hope to learn from today's session. There's also a link to the slides in the chat, so you can follow along or download the slides at a later point. Because I tend to put a lot of links into my slides, and then it's easier if you can just download everything. And use a data repository to get to the slides, actually. Okay, then I'll try to get started. And then if Namis or Emmanuel, if you can confirm that you actually see my slide.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Awesome. So today's sessions is going to be about open data, benefits and challenges. So today we're not, I already saw some people mentioning how do I make the data open? How do I do that in a safe way? We're not going to touch very much upon that today, a little bit more in the second session. But again, if you have anything specific that you want to know or that you want to discuss, then we can do that during the exercises and or any questions at the end as well. So just a heads up there. So my name is Esther. I'm a data steward at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. So I answer a lot of questions on data management, software management, open science. Where do I share data? Do I even have data? Where do I store things? And next to that, I'm involved in a lot of open science communities, such as the Turing Way, OLS, and the Open Research Calendar. So I'm involved in a couple of things. So if you want to know more about that, then also feel free to ask me about this. I also tend to talk quite fast, so if at any point it is too fast, please let me know so I can slow down. And we already have a first question, so feel free to interrupt.
Howard, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Maybe that was an accident?
Maybe, yeah, I think so.
Oh, no, I don't have. It's a mistake.
Okay, no worries, no worries.
Cool, but as you can see, please interrupt at any point. More than happy to do that. And today I'm alone, but Bosun was involved with preparing the session and really wanted to be here today. Unfortunately, he had a death of a close family member very unexpectedly. So he really wanted to be here today, but couldn't make it, unfortunately. But he'll be there for the follow-up sessions. So any questions that you have for him, he can hopefully answer them. And he's also on Slack. So wishing him strength to get through the situation. Okay. So what we're going to do today is have a brief introduction on open data, just so that we're all on the same page. We're going to, what I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we're going to do 2 exercises based on the pre-reading material that you got. So that part is going to be hopefully a lot more interactive and a lot less of me talking. Then we're going to go over some African initiatives, particularly relevant to open data, and very briefly on the future trends. So to start off with, what is actually open data? And open data is data that can be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone, subject only or at most to the requirements to attribute and share alike. So what that means is that anyone can reuse the data for their own purposes as long as they give credit to the original source. And they shouldn't require more requirements for reuse to the data. So that's open data. And I think you already discussed a little bit about licenses in other sessions. So this would be similar to CC0, CC BY, and CC BY SA. But if these letters don't make any sense to you, that's okay. You can forget that for now. We'll go into that in the second session a bit. So what you need to remember is basically that the data can be freely reused and redistributed. So that means in order to do that, you would need to have access to the data. So it needs to be available on the internet to everyone on demand. It can also involve some degree of participation of people. not just from the user side of things, as in you need to be able to access it, and you must be able to use it and redistribute, but perhaps also more in terms of how is the data constructed. There you can also think about participation. It also comes with a degree of transparency, hopefully. So if you only put data online, then what can people really do with it if you don't give them also the context of the data? So how was the data generated, collected, what research questions were people trying to answer, when was the data generated, what instruments were used, etc. So if people do not have that information, can they really reuse the data? Then for the reuse distribution part, so we'll go into that in the second session, but it must be done under terms that permit this reuse and redistribution. So if you now just put anything on the internet without a license, then people are not actually allowed to reuse the materials unless you gave them exclusive permission. And then they need to contact you. We'll go into that in the next slide, that is not the best way to do things. It also is relying on a sense of interoperability, in the sense that eventually the idea of open data is also to be able to integrate open data with other data, so that you have a bigger data set, you can answer different questions, you can use artificial intelligence, which is the current hype. And for that, it needs to be interoperable, not just for humans, but also for machines. And we'll also go into that a little bit in the second session of open data. I also wanted to go into what is not open data. And maybe you're familiar if you see a scientific publication where at the end of the article they say something like the data will be available upon request. And I'm not sure if any of you tried, but if you then try to reach out to researchers, other researchers have actually done this, try to reach out to researchers who said data will be available upon request. And they found out that no, that's actually not the case. And increasingly, the longer you wait after the publication has been published for asking about this data, you will actually have a decreased chance of getting the data. So Fines et al. in 2014 already, they studied this and they found that the data availability decreases by 17% per year. So the longer the publication is published, the more chances that people will not be able to provide you with the data. And that's partially because well, people move institutes and lose access to email addresses. And so that means that it's already difficult to reach out to people and actually get them to read the email. Apologies about that, my voice seems to cave in. And actually they had a very rough conclusion, but I do agree with them. That research data cannot be reliably preserved by individual researchers. So that might be a little bit rough, but this is why we have things such as data repositories, whose main task it is to preserve data for the long term. So that should not be the individual researcher's obligation. And we recently had another study about this, and they actually didn't find improvements. So from 2014 to 2021, we didn't do so much better as individual researchers. And in this study, they actually received no response to their emails in 40% of the cases. And so you can imagine that for the other 60%, it might have fared even worse in terms of actually then getting the data. So even if you can contact people, then what happens if you get do they actually provide you with the data? As they said in the publication, when they said data will be available upon request. I hope my voice will carry me through this presentation, sorry. And if there's more studies being done, I'm only highlighting these two, but there's a couple of more studies where they found similar findings that people basically do not respond to emails, and if they do, then it's going to be difficult to still find the data. And this is why we need open data and data repositories in order to make sure that the data will last. And today we were going to discuss benefits and challenges of open data. And so this is my most text-heavy slide because I think there's lots of benefits to open data. So for example, if you share the data, you can prevent data loss and unfindable files. And so as just mentioned, with all of these people being contacted about their data available upon request, lots of people actually lose access to the data. They don't have it backed up, hard drives crashes, things get stolen, etc. So by sharing it on a data repository, for example, you can prevent that data loss because then the repository will be responsible for preserving your data for the long time. It can also result in increased citations. So there's a couple of studies which have seen that if you make the data underlying the publications openly available, that can actually increase the citations of the accompanying publication or the work. So this can increase your impact in research. It can also facilitate collaboration because if people see how you manage the data or what type of data you have, they can also more easily reach out to you to collaborate on projects. And in general, the person that generated the data knows the data best. So in that sense, it can be easier for people to work together with people that are sharing data instead of trying to find out their way through the data by themselves and probably finding some hurdles there. I think very importantly, open data increases the quality of research by increasing reproducibility and transparency of research. That's one of my personal reasons why I prefer open data. But it can also be cost and time efficient. So there's a bit of a curve to learning how to make data openly available in a useful way. But then in the end, it can be cost time efficient because again, you might prevent data loss. And also, if people are asking you about the data afterwards and you still have to go back to things, that is not the most efficient way of doing it. If instead you can just provide them with a link to where the data is in the data repository. So there's also cost of not doing this. And there's, I think, one publication, but if people know more, I'd be happy to learn. Of estimate cost of actually not having this data available. So it's not really cost to the researcher individually, but to global research. And that's because if you don't share open data, there's a lot of duplication efforts going on of people trying to redo certain research projects where, as some people already know, it's not going to work, but they didn't share the results because they didn't want to publish the negative results. And so if we do have these negative results and if we do have that open data, that can prevent a lot of people from being stuck in research projects that are not working and are very heavy on starting researchers who may think that it's their fault, whereas it's just the project not working out. It can also prevent retractions. There's a website, retractions.org or Retraction Watch. Can link it in the chat later. But basically, if you already have the data and the code available from the publication, then it can be verified by researchers during the publication process. And then, well, if there's a mistake or anything, then you don't need to retract it later. It's basically fixed upfront instead of having to find out about that later. And it can also prevent some malicious behavior where people have faked the data afterwards because they could get away with the data as available upon request. So I think every discipline has stories like this, and Retraction Watch is a nice website to read up on this. Yeah, once open data is available for people, they can also use it for as resources for training and education. So for example, I'm reusing a lot of images from the Turing Way, and that's because they allow that by using a CC BY license for their images. And so the only thing that I have to do, which is also actually in the slide, is saying that the illustration is created by Scriberia with the Turing Way community, is used under this license, and this is the link to the rest of the illustrations. And so that's how you apply a license. You can also encounter open data requirements when you're based at an institute or a funder that wants open data. And also, open data encourages innovation, well, by reuse of the data or by sharing failed projects, etc., so that we can skip all of those inquiries and just move on to the next research line. So loads of benefits of open data, and this is really the most text-heavy slide, but that's just to reiterate that there's lots of benefits on for open data. But there's also challenges, and you read about this also in the reading, hopefully. And I think this is where I would like to launch the poll, Emmanuel, because there was a reading on the challenges and one mainly on the benefits. And I'm kind of wondering if you have a preference from one of the readings. And I suppose I cannot see the poll myself if I'm sharing a screen, right?
Okay, so should I launch it now?
Yes. I can indeed not answer it myself. I suppose that's safe. And if you have any reason that you want to share in the chat why you liked one of the readings better, please feel free to share. Yeah, I think this is slowing down, so I think we could close it in a bit.
Okay, sure.
And can you then also share it? So it would be nice to see.
The results, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so ended it now.
So hopefully you can see the shared results now, right? Not entirely, because I can also see the background of the back end of it, so I'm not sure if participants can see it now. But basically the hidden concerns of sharing research data won by 59%, and 5 selfish reasons to work reproducibly 41%. So it's still, I guess each reading has its own function. Cool. Thanks so much for answering the poll. That helps. If no one likes one of the readings, then I would not assign it anymore to future training. Okay, so what we'll do now is use the Google Doc again. We'll first go into the challenges of open data. And so there's a section in the Google Doc. Let me see if I can also share it, where the question is also shared. So you can find it there, so you don't need to remember by heart. So it's on the second page, so you may need to scroll a little bit. And if you like the introduction, can just add your name before you answer it. And then add something on what is a challenge from the readings that you relate to, and or is there still a remaining challenge after the reading? And no worries if the poll doesn't work. You can also share it in the chat if you're comfortable with which reading you preferred.
There was another question in the chat, Esther.
Yeah, maybe we can answer the question about where to share the data at the end so that people can actually, so that we're not talking through people thinking about their challenges. Okay, great. And again, if you can't use the Google Doc, then feel free to also put this in the chat. I'll copy the questions in the chat as well. And then I can add it later. And then I'll be silent for a minute so that you can actually think. And I see someone is typing in French, so please do that. I can read and understand French. I'm just not able to speak it very well. So if you're more comfortable writing it down in French, please do so. I think it's slowing down a bit with the typing. So if you're still typing, please do go ahead. But in the meantime, it would be nice if anyone wants to elaborate on their challenge. If you want to do that by unmuting and sharing, then please go ahead. And if that is too challenging, then I'll go over a couple of the challenges that I'm seeing here. And so people are saying, where can I safely share data? How to manage them? Colleagues not being aware of benefits of open data. Yes, Steve, you want to speak? Oh no. Okay, then I'll continue. Yes, colleagues not being aware of the benefits. How data can be shared. A bit on documentation as well. So yeah, reading an article is unfortunately not going to solve all of the challenges. But hopefully these sessions will also help you a bit. So for example, lack of awareness on the benefits of open data or copyright, licensing, etc. At the end of these sessions, you are also able to reuse the slides of trainers, right? So anything that any of the trainers are teaching you throughout this program, you can then also take to other researchers or other people and reuse the material so that you can make them a bit more aware. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I'm just trying to see if there's anything I can tap in. I still find peer review a horror. I hope at some point you'll find nice peer reviewers. Actually, open peer review is more constructive than closed peer review in my experience. I think this might be a response to yesterday's session on open peer review, no? Hopefully you get good experiences there.
Yeah,
But
I think
yeah.
it's the response to yesterday.
No, the laptop imezima.
Yeah, it can be quite scary to share your work and then have other people looking at it. But if you do that during peer review, then at least if anything is still wrong in the data, then at least you weren't the only person who missed that. So maybe that helps a little bit to at least share it during peer review. Okay. So I think part of the challenges we'll discuss a bit in the upcoming sessions as well. So particularly more on ownership, copyright will be in the second session. And also more of the how do we actually do this will be a bit more in June when we go a little bit more hands-on. How do you actually share data in a data repository? And I don't see particular questions on reusing or challenges on reusing data. So maybe that workshop won't be a challenge at all. But that will also be upcoming in the future. Okay, I think typing for the challenges has almost stopped. And I don't see any questions in the chat related to the challenges. So then I want to move to the second exercise, and I see someone is already very enthusiastically answering, which is great. So if you scroll down in the Google Doc, you'll see a question on the benefits. And so if you can share what is a benefit of open data from the literature that you relate to, and you can also share what other benefits that you see for open data that we have or haven't discussed yet in the slides or in the literature. And then I'll shut up for a couple of minutes to actually let you type. Okay, I see typing is slowing down. Do please add your name to whatever it is that you gave us an answer so that we can use this as an assessment exercise, etc., to make sure that you participated and understood the concepts of open data in the session. So for that, unfortunately, no anonymous answers, but hopefully in the spirit of openness, you can feel free to add your name to your answers. Then, if does anyone want to elaborate on their answer? For example, one of the things that we didn't mention, I think not in the science and not in the literature, is how open data can lead to boosting one's confidence. So if you want to elaborate on that, please go ahead. If not, don't feel like you have to. I find a very interesting answer, or like a very nice answer. And other than that, I do see a lot of things that we mentioned in the slides earlier. So increased data quality, transparency, increasing citations, visibility of the researcher, more robust research, easy access, reuse, transparency, avoiding mistakes. Yes, absolutely. We didn't say that clearly, but yes, it can obviously avoid mistakes. Yeah, and again, if you can't type things in the Google Doc, then feel free to put it in the chat, or if it's easier to do it after the session, we'll leave the Google Doc open so then you can still add your name and your answers, because obviously also not everyone's here, I think. And so if you're listening to the recording, then please do use the Google Doc to add your answers. Yeah, minimize duplication efforts, more collaboration. Yeah, so all of these are, of course, great answers. All right, well, it looks like you're convinced that open data has benefits. You might be a bit of a biased audience if you're participating in this program. It's good to see that you, in your answers, you're very positive about open data. Okay, so feel free to keep on typing if you still need some more time. But in the interest of time, I'll also go to a couple of more slides so that we have sufficient time for questions at the end. I can find my slides. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing slides, and otherwise please do yell that okay, great, thanks. So we looked up a couple of initiatives where open data was particularly relevant in the African context. And I think I'm doing a very poor job compared to Lamis and Emmanuel, who already shared a great slide of lots of initiatives. So I think maybe Africa Archive was also already on that. But you did a fantastic job in I think that was the first session of the program. So I don't really have a lot of initiatives to add, but perhaps Do for Africa, or DO for Africa, is another one to go through too. TAMO, which is the Trans-African Hydrometeorological Observatory, is another initiative where open data is key. And there's Open Research Africa, where they also enable rapid sharing, discovery, use, and reuse of African research to the benefit of all. That is their mission. And so hopefully these initiatives are of interest. And especially Africa Archive is quite interesting in the sense that I think it might be the only archive where you can also share data sets, presentations, and other research outputs other than preprints, actually. So it's a very nice initiative / data repository. Okay. And then there's actually a lot of African open government data initiatives. So lots of countries actually have their own open data portal. So if you're interested in that, I probably have not listed all of the countries, but for maybe your country is listed here, and then you can check out the open governmental data. Then this initiative, which is called Continental Platform, that's actually not a data repository, but I still wanted to highlight this because I don't think I've seen it in slides from other people. So if it's a repeat, apologies. But I actually thought that this is a very cool model for Diamond Open Access. So open access publishing without a cost to the researchers that want to publish in there, and without a cost to the readers that want to read the research. And this is a community-based publishing system started by the University of Cape Town. And there's a couple of other countries involved, which are all listed on the website. There's 2 short research articles or presentation articles about this initiative. And I think you can also still join it if you're interested, but you can also use the journals that are listed there if you want to publish in these. So just wanted to highlight that, even though it's not a data repository, so I'm kind of cheating here. Then a couple of Bosun slides. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do this justice. So hopefully he can answer any questions and or maybe elaborate a little bit on this in the next session. But he particularly highlighted that the open data is important to African researchers because of the increase of the research impact. And so he's mentioning that most research data was ending up on a local hard disk when people are polishing on it, and open data increases visibility and recognition within the global research community. So similar to what you also mentioned in the Google Doc, visibility and recognition are very important. It's also promoting trust, integrity, transparency, and even more transparency, just 2 times transparency. And it allows other researchers to scrutinize results and reproduce them. So that can increase trust and integrity of the researcher. And you also gave similar answers, right? Transparency came in. Also trust, I think I saw trust twice maybe. And I think maybe also this is where the boost of confidence of the individual goes. This is, yeah, really something for your own peace of mind to also do, right? If you're more sure that there's no mistakes in the eventual data, etc., and you've done the best job that you can. It also can help with faster inclusivity and equity because it breaks down barriers to information and allows researchers from any region of the world to participate in research. And it can also provide evidence for decision makers. So open data can help for policy making and also to keep your government accountable. So these are things why it can be important to African researchers. I think these should be reasons for any researcher in the world. So I think we have similar reasons to participate in open data from what I've seen also in the answers. So hopefully it's a bit generally applicable, even though we're from widely different disciplines. Open data can connect us. And so a little bit about how this has been going on for the past couple of years and how that will hopefully go in the future. So before, the norms had always been secrecy when it comes to research outputs. So because you might be afraid that people will steal the work. So people are not sharing data because what if someone else will publish on it? That's also outside of Africa. That's still one of the main reasons why people are scared or don't want to share data openly. Now it's more that awareness of open data is growing. It's getting tractions with national and institutional open data policies going on. So I didn't include the slide on policies because I think someone else already discussed that in previous sessions. But there is indeed lots happening across the continent regarding policy development and open data, open science. And then hopefully in the future, we'll go to a place where fair and care principles of open data are institutionalized within open data policies and frameworks so that we can improve collaboration, data reuse, get more funding and innovation going on. And what fair and care principles are, I think you already had a bit of an introduction, but we'll go into that in the second session on open data in detail. So in that sense, it's also a future, as in it will be discussed in the next session. Let's see. Yeah, then I have a couple of resources listed on the slides. So I think one of you already asked a question on how to actually share data. So the first one, how can you make research data accessible, actually goes into that already in detail. I've mentioned the Turing Way earlier, so I've reused a couple of images from the Turing Way, but they have an entire chapter on open research, reproducible research, which you can look into for more detailed information. And there's also a section on open data by Open Sciencey, where you can also read more about open data. And then, as I mentioned, in the next session, on the 29th of May, we'll go into the care and fair principles and data management plan as a tool to adhere to these principles. So that's what we'll do in the future. But for now, that hopefully leaves a bit of time for questions. So thank you very much for your attention and for your active input with the Google Doc. Thanks so much for bearing with me with connectivity issues and trying to do this on your phone. I realize that that's not the nicest way to do all of the typing, but thank you very much for participating. And thanks very much to Alan, to Lamis and Emmanuel for facilitating and hosting this session. It's very nice that I don't have to do everything myself. So thank you very much for that as well. And then we'll go to questions.
Before we go to questions, one of the things that also came, first of all, thank you very much for this beautiful session. It was very intriguing. But one of the things that I was thinking about in a way that we could advocate open data in our institutions is that there's sort of an understanding in the global north that research that's coming from Africa is often not trusted, or maybe people are just like putting data from their own and just publishing. So I think this could be one of the strongest weapons that we could use to help our colleagues and our institution to understand the importance of open data. Is this will be a proof, we will help to remove this stigma about African research outputs. Since we have the data there, no one could say anything. So this is just something that I wanted to add.
Yeah, absolutely. You should add that as to the document as one of the benefits.
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah, it's the same with any research output, right? As long as everything is available, then that could increase trust and trust in the research and the researcher. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, I see no hands raised, so I'll go back to a previous question in the chat. It was about, when you share the data, can you just send that off to the journal in order to share it? And that would really depend on which discipline you're in. So some research disciplines do not generate a lot of data, and then you can indeed share all of the data alongside with the publication itself, because the publication itself is most of the data. So then that will suffice. But if you have big data sets with different type of data formats, then ideally you would need to share that in a data repository. So for example, Africa Archive could be a good solution. We'll go into other data repositories in the next session, but I know in the previous sessions, Zenodo has been mentioned, Figshare has been mentioned. So you already know of data repositories that you can use also for free. So that will be a more ideal way of sharing the data for multiple reasons, because you have more, how do you say that? Not necessarily ownership, but you have more control over the data. Once you've published something in a journal, it's quite difficult to update it. Whereas if you share it in a data repository, for example, Figshare and Zenodo all allow versioning. So if you have an update of the data set, you can just add the updated data set and you'll have another version of it. So you can control it a bit better in that sense. And you can also choose your own license for it. So how can others reuse the data? Again, the second session will go a bit more into that. So if this is not making any sense, then hopefully the second session will help you there. So yeah, the summary of that answer is a little bit, it depends on what it is that you're trying to share. Yeah, I see a very valid comment in the chat. The Global North does not trust data from Africa, but we have more publication retractions from the Global North. Yeah, there's absolutely no reason to put more trust in someone just because they're based at a certain institute or because they're based in a certain country. The most, I think, notorious data fakers, fraudsters have been from, I think, China and possibly from the US. So there's unfortunately, yeah, there's no reason for this bias, but I know it exists. We have several research publications on this indeed. Once publications are from the Global North, that the people are automatically placing more trust in that. And that's, yeah, that's, I don't want to swear on a recording, but that's something which is difficult to tackle. But like Lana said, if you're doing the best job that you can do, make the data available, then that's the way of countering it. Yeah. Are there best practices for using and sharing synthetic data? I think in general, you can follow similar rules as normal data. So synthetic data is not necessarily real data, but it's based on the parameters of the data sets that you're probably not allowed to share because there's things like personal data in them or information about vulnerable individuals. So you don't want to necessarily share that. But then you can share the synthetic data so that people can still go over your thoughts, procedures, data analysis, etc. To use it for their own purposes, but also to reevaluate your research. So I think it can mostly follow the same practices as normal data, so to say, but it does need to be clear that it is synthetic data. So in your documentation, it will be more important to indicate is it synthetic data or not? How have you been generating this approximately? And perhaps also share the, if you're doing this randomization or creating synthetic data with scripts, to also make these scripts available. And I can also, I am not sure if there's a section on synthetic data in the Turing way, but I can check and follow up with that in the next session. Hopefully that helps.
I actually have a question. I'm also one of the trainees because I'm new to open data. So my question is, if, for example, I'm collecting data, let's say a questionnaire from like patients or something like that, am I obligated in the, when I'm taking the consent, am I obligated to tell them that this data would be made open? Of course, like their names would be like coded or something, but do I have to say that from the very beginning in the consent form?
Ideally, yes. And so there's two different aspects of this. So in Europe, and I'm not entirely sure if that works the same in Africa, because I think you have different regulations. But in Europe, you're not legally obliged to do that, because once you anonymize the data, it's no longer personal data. So then basically you should be able to do whatever it is that you want with the data. But then ethically, that is not really fair to patients and people who share their time and their opinion, their perhaps samples, tissues, etc. with you, and trust you to do the best thing that you for them as well with that research. So I would always ask or inform the people, if you already have an informed consent anyway, always inform them about what it is that you plan to do with it. And that doesn't have to be in a detailed essay, etc., but they do need to understand that this is probably going to get published, and then, it might be reused for future research, etc. There has been also some research on that. People actually like for their data and their time and effort to be shared more widely to more people, because then it benefits more people. This is also why some patients participate in program, right? Not necessarily because it will help their own treatment, because it might be too late, but it can help future treatment. So I would expect people to also be enthusiastic about that. And if they are not enthusiastic about that, then yeah, you do need to consider whether you can take that data from people, whether this is the right patients to participate in your research projects.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. And the issue about me asking that, because I had an experience about like talking to patients and asking questionnaires to patients, and I generally, maybe this is my experience, I'm not sure about the other participants in the other countries, but the more that information you give them, the more they get scared.
Yeah.
Which is a big issue. So now you're in the, I don't know, in a dilemma of whether you should really tell them everything or maybe like withhold some of the information. So talking about my like community and the patients that I work with, if I tell them that, oh, this information will be openly available after the research is done, even though that like your name will not be there, I'm pretty sure that most of them would refuse. So yeah, it's a big issue, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. But do they then, does it help to clarify that there's no way that it can lead to them? Do they need maybe a little bit more of the rephrasing instead of withholding? Maybe starting with, this is standard research practice to actually share the data so that we can increase the reliability of research and increase the impact of your time, etc. as well. Instead of there's a possibility that your data will be openly available, and then maybe people already stop listening because they indeed get scared.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yes.
it's more about the rephrasing there.
I think so, but like no matter what you do, I think it also depends on the sensitivity of the like the thing that you're working with. For example, I'm working with mycetoma patients, and mycetoma is like surrounded by a lot of stigma. So maybe this is the reason why, but like generally in my community, like diseases and illnesses is sort of as like a weakness. So it's usually difficult. And one of the other issues is that patients have been used a lot in many researches without researchers letting them know that they're using their information. So the norm is that they're not giving any information. And of course this is not ethical, but then when you try to be ethical and tell them everything, you wind up scaring them off. But yeah, again, this is the community that I work with. I'm not sure like if like other African communities is different. But I think it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. Yeah.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And this is also why I'm hesitant with withholding information.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could also find a middle ground, as in maybe if there's any existing publications, you can just share a research article and provide examples of like, this is how it looks like in a research article. And then indeed maybe not share the data in this case, because if these people really are really scared of otherwise participating, then that's a reason to keep the data closed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then because otherwise you can't even do the research. So it's a good reason.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's also,
go ahead.
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm also sharing, the experiences with ethical aspects of this data sharing. Yeah, and when we're collecting data, we're providing information and take consent. Yeah, and from one in terms of privacy and confidentiality, we're providing much information about, this data is utilized by the researcher and no one access this one or something like that. Yeah, we are providing such kind of information on ethical principles. And the ethical issue may
Aman, if you could unmute yourself again, there's been some interruptions. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm also sharing, the experiences of Lamis. I'm from Ethiopia, and usually we provide also much information about, in terms of privacy and also confidentiality, consent. We provide much information. So one of the information we provide, collect data is, in terms of privacy and confidentiality. And we provide much information about this data is only used for the research purpose, only used by the research team, and no one cannot access this data. And also we provide information about confidentiality, of course. This data is aggregate data. If it's published, not identifier is not utilized. So how do you see, in terms of also open data science with these ethical aspects? Because we are already said information on the ethical issue, this data is only accessed by, the research team. The current research team is not utilized by other or something like that. So can we change that experience as well? Because we are providing information in terms of only that data is only used for the researcher who intended to collect that data at that time. Thank you so much.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Pauline.
Hi. I would like
Yeah.
to contribute to the discussion that is on the table right now. I think one of the most important things that we need to do, like the two have said, is providing sufficient information on how the data that we are going to collect, if shared, is going to help others or maybe improve certain services or help other people who are maybe in a similar situation. So what we need to do is, apart from just telling them that we are using it maybe for the research purpose, we should also tell them that this information is going to be shared. It's going to be open data because it's going to help in one way or another in terms of being impactful in our communities and stuff like that. So we tell them more about how this information that they have provided, if it is provided on an open platform, would help others. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. And you had your hand raised before, so were you able to say everything you wanted?
Yes, I wanted to say the same thing with regards to providing sufficient information on the benefits of sharing the data openly. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. I equally want to join the rest of the team. I think what Lami said and last speaker, I concord with them. It has to do with culture. It differs culture from culture to culture. I understood where I work here. We have doctors from Europe and then from Africa here. But just yesterday, a similar case was experienced here, that a doctor is able to talk to a patient about nearing his death. And in Africa, you don't just go straight to the point and then inform somebody, you know, like that. So we were discussing that. We're like, okay, in Africa, you don't just come face blank and then talk to somebody straight in the eye like that. You have to somehow be about abuse, or you have to find a way to say it in a way that the person will kind of accommodate the information. Like what the last speaker said, providing sufficient information. I think in most cases, people are skeptical. They want to know what happened to their data or their name, their personal identifiers and stuff like that. So it's at the beginning might be a challenge for the first timer who is trying to consent. But I think the researcher has to go in an extra mile to convince them. And I think once they are convinced, some participants can even become a very good participants to convince other participants as well. Yeah, so in Africa it's different. You cannot just come straight to the point and then say this, but you have to engage in a prolonged discussion and then make sure you bring all the aspects in place. Let them know that their data, would not go out there, but the researcher will control the data. But whatever that is going out there, their name would not be on it, and it doesn't harm any of the participants at the end of the day. I believe once they are convinced, it should work. Thank you.
Does that help, Lamis, or do you maybe have comments on this? And I also saw someone else saying that they have experience in the chat, so if you also want to share, please go ahead.
First of all, I know, Esther, we're a bit over time, so I hope that it's okay with you.
Yeah, I mean, if people need to leave, then please do hop off. Before you do, if you do have some extra time to let me know what you liked or did not like about this session. There's at the end of the Google Doc, there's a little bit about feedback. So if you can fill that out, there you don't have to provide your name. If you want to do that anonymous, that's also, please do so. Feel free to do that. But it would be nice, and there goes my camera, sorry. It would be nice to be able to improve the upcoming sessions because we still have a couple of sessions to go. So if I know whether you like particular things or not, then we can hopefully still adjust and make the sessions more applicable to you. But yeah, go ahead, Lois. I still have about 15 minutes and then I do really need to go.
Perfect. I think there's a really interesting question in the chat from Joseph, where he said that some researchers prefer to sell their data for the research since they funded it themselves. I think this is very interesting, to be honest. I'm not sure. Maybe Joseph, you want to expand on this more?
Okay, I will explain the question. We meet some researchers in our university here, University of Benin, who refuse to share the result of the that is the result, the data they collect for the research. So they say they will sell it for another person who would like to use it. So they do not share it openly. I would like to know, what do you think about that person? That data would not be open, but would be hidden. Would be hidden. I don't know if you understand my
Yeah.
question.
I think so, but feel free to interrupt if I'm not answering. I think.
Can I say something over the same over the question? I have a similar experience from our institution, where researchers are not comfortable with releasing their data openly, because they're saying that they spent money, time, and other resources to come up with that data. And if it's to be open, what are their benefits?
Yes.
In most cases, they'll carry out research or collect data, and they expect incentives or to gain something out of it. So what's the point of them investing into data collection, and then at the end of the day, they're not benefiting anything? And for me, what I think is that issues of policy, I think, come first, because once we have policies in these institutions, then researchers are guided on how they are going to conduct the research, how they are going to be financed, and how and what implications will be there if the data is provided openly. So we need to find ways to ensure that if we are to encourage researchers to produce and also provide this information openly, then we should find resources to incentivize them and also support them in their research endeavors. So what he's talking about is something that is real. It's happening in our institutions, and most of the researchers are not comfortable. They'll only release the data if the institution is paying for them to do the data, and they're paid under the institution to collect or produce that information. But if they are doing it with their own resources, they are not willing to provide the data openly. So we need to find ways of how to address this issue, because it's there issues of incentivizing the researchers for the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for addressing, I think, most of the things that I also wanted to say. Indeed, if there's a policy, then you have more power behind you to ensure that people share the data. But I also just want to stress that I can also understand why, if people are financing things themselves and they don't want to share these results, or they still want to make it, ensure that they can use it for another publication, then that's also understandable in the sense that they're not publicly financed, etc. They don't have security to ensure that they're in a position in the long time as well, right? So this is also about our institute supporting our work. And there are loads of benefits to this. We've seen them throughout this session, but if people don't see these benefits, then it might remain to be difficult to be convincing these people that they should share it out of the goodness of their heart, so to say. And perhaps indeed. So I have not really encountered instances where people could actually sell their data. I think here I'm more familiar with people applying for patent applications and have IP rights written under their name, etc. And that is exactly the same thing. And then the data is also hidden for a longer time until the patent is completed or has run out. So I would also, I cannot judge people that that finance their own research and then don't want to share it yet, or yeah, have doubts about this, because these things are also still happening in the global north, perhaps in different ways. So yeah, I think my main point was that, I mean, we know that there's lots of benefits for open data, but I would be careful to just say like, well, this has to happen because it has to happen. We maybe need a more of a dialogue of what it could bring to them. But I think you also said that, Pauline. Go ahead.
Yeah. I actually even commented in the last section where I was saying that like for us, maybe as librarians, one of the things that we need to do to support open data is to ensure that we educate and train the researchers on these benefits. So all these things we've talked about, the benefits of open data and everything else, if we can train them maybe through workshops or online tutorials and guide them on the benefits of open data and what support they can get from other people that they can collaborate with when they put their data on open platforms, and also how visible they can be, and also maybe enhance on their research skills and just research undertakings. Maybe that way we should be able to get where we want to be with regards to open science. So there's more to do with regards to education and training. Make them understand that there's more to putting the data on open platforms than the incentives that the immediate incentives that they might want to get. But then
For
all
sure.
gets to policy issues. What does the institution say about open data? What does the country say about open data? I think once we have those policies in place and we tell the people that this is what is there and this is how you can utilize these different platforms, then we should be good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I see Banjo has their hands risen, so you can unmute. Banjo?
In the chat it says, can you use my data without my approval?
Oh, okay.
It's a bit difficult to answer that without further context, but hopefully no. You should be able to consent to any data use which is done in research. But yeah, this is also why you have to say yes to a lot of things whenever you try to use some software or application, right? So you also consent indirectly to whatever it is that they want to do with your data. I'm not sure if you're referring to that. You might need some more time to type that out in the chat.
Yeah, and I think also like here comes the importance of making people aware of the different copyrights that you could attach to your data or to your documents or whatever, because I think many people have open equal to just, completely out of control. So yeah, I think we need to know more about the different licenses, and this maybe would help alleviate some of the concerns that people have. But yeah, I love the discussion. I love the discussion. It's always interesting to see the different perspectives. For me, I've never encountered people setting their data. So this was eye-opening to me, to be honest. And this is the reason why we initiated this training, is to know those unique challenges that are in Africa, that you might not encounter in other parts of the word, so that we could know how to address them and solve them. So I think if no one else have a question, we really thank you, Esther, so much for giving us half an hour over from the originally allocated time. And thank you for our Chinese for sticking and always making the conversation really nice. Yeah. And I think we really looking forward for the next session. Yes.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for all of your active participation and sharing of your knowledge and expertise. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you, Esther.
thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. See you. See you tomorrow.
Bye. See you
See you
tomorrow.
Yes.
See you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Au revoir.
Au revoir. Au revoir. For French people.
Yeah, we need to start learning our languages, like the different African languages. That would be good. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
again.
Thank you,
See you tomorrow.
ladies.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
See you. See you.
Bye. Bye.